In America, basic things like groceries, rent, utilities, and gas, they all cost more. Depending on the week, you may need a loan just to buy a dozen eggs. Same conversation's happening right now in Washington, D.C., because we're approaching a national debt ceiling. But nationally, it's not about rent and groceries. It's about $31 trillion in debt. That's a lot of eggs, even in this economy. Our nation's the only nation in the world that has an overall debt limit. The debt limit forces Congress to talk about how we got this deep in debt and what we can do to stop it. It's not a new conversation. The first debt ceiling was enacted in 1917 through the Second Liberty Bond Act. In 1939, Congress created the first aggregate debt limit for all government debt, which at that time, if you can believe it, was about $45 billion total. Many times in the past 100 years, Congress has added to the debt limit some ways to reduce spending or to address the total debt, but they've made changes in addition to the debt ceiling. But this time, President Biden is telling America we need to raise the debt ceiling without discussing any way to cut the spending. Just keep spending other people's money at the same rate we are now. It's just not believable that federal spending is so efficient, there's absolutely nowhere to cut. If you don't believe me, flip through this year's federal Fumbles. It's a starting point for anyone in America, even President Biden, to see a list of ways we can reduce spending and be more responsible with America's tax money. Just like you do at the grocery store when you pick up what you can afford and you can't afford, you leave on the shelf. Congress should consider what programs can be cut to bring down our $31 trillion debt. Some people have said to me, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, there'll be terrible economic consequences. I agree. We have to pay America's debts. But I also ask people to look around and see the terrible economic consequences that are already here because of our nation overspending and our massive debt. We have high inflation, higher mortgage rates, and more will just keep on coming. The free-range, grass-fed chickens have come home to roost, and we need to do something about it. Over the next 10 years, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that interest payments on our debt will total $10.5 trillion if nothing changes. And that's just the interest payments, $10.5 trillion. And some of those interest payments will go outside the United States to countries like China who have purchased our debt. And currently, this may not come as a great shock to many of you, Congress has no workable plan to address it. Not one. Right now, I can pull up a page that will tell me what food options are going to be in the Senate cafeteria for the next month. That means that this body literally knows what we'll have for lunch a month from Tuesday, but we don't have a clue how we're going to solve the one problem that could literally bring down our entire economy. 72% of Americans say our nation is headed in the wrong direction under President Biden's failed leadership. I'm one of them. Probably you are too. I've been calling out the need to address our debt, deficit, and overspending since I was first elected in Congress in 2011. 1 month into my time in office, I was speaking about the huge deficit and the fact that at that time, the Senate had not passed a budget in 1,008 days. And the United States was looking at the fourth straight year of trillion-dollar deficits. There's only been one serious effort to actually reduce federal spending in the last 12 years, and that was during the debt ceiling debate of 2011. When President Biden was at that time Vice President Biden, and he was the White House lead negotiator in the debt ceiling debate. Since 2011, only two things have really changed. One, the entire dysfunctional budget and spending process has gotten worse. And two, I have way more gray hair now than I had back then. Both those things really frustrate me. But to make a bad situation even worse, in 2022, Democrats chose to flood the economy with trillions of additional dollars in federal spending. That was tacked onto our huge debt that was already growing out of control. Groceries, rent, crime rates all went up, but retirement savings, now they went down. More people are forced to live paycheck to paycheck, and inflation feels like it's never going to end. It's really difficult to stop inflation once it gets started. Quite frankly, there's a whole generation of Americans who have never lived through inflation like this. They've not seen the real effects of inflation on their own personal economy or on our national economy. But you can't chase inflation with more and more government spending. That only makes it worse. I don't know if you know this, but pouring gasoline on a fire may seem like fun, but it actually doesn't put out the fire. It's clear the budget and spending problems, they're still there. The process is still broken. I talked about this actually in Volume 6 of Federal Fumbles, which you can also go back and read a little history of the process at www.lankford.senate.gov. You may ask yourself while you're reading through that, why do I even care about national debt? Well, I'm just trying to take care of my kids, going to work, going to school, working on my career, caring for senior adults in my life. This is really a Congress problem. Well, in some ways that's true. It is a Congress problem, and Congress does have to fix this. But it's also America's problem. All of us. So it's important that all of us stay informed about this and that all of us push Congress to solve it. Now, President Biden is now saying there's nowhere to negotiate on federal spending. I have to tell you, I totally disagree. Let me give you some examples of what I mean. What about $4 million to one of the wealthiest communities in America? Scratch that. One of the wealthiest communities in the world, Napa Valley, California. $4 million of federal money was given to them for an 8.2-mile pedestrian trail. That's right, a wine walking trail. I think that community can afford to pay for it on their own. Why are the people of Oklahoma having to help pay for Napa Valley, California's walking trail? And when the weather is nice, we all enjoy a little outdoor dining. But we quite frankly expect the business that's there to be able to pay for the outdoor dining venue. Nope. Instead, you are helping pay $1.5 million for a street dining venue in Pasadena, California. How about $1 million in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in Cleveland, Ohio? You may love rock and roll, but Cleveland could learn a thing or two from Tulsa, Oklahoma, where our world-renowned Bob Dylan Center, it didn't take one penny of federal tax dollars to rock on. I also don't believe that Americans want to pay $2.5 million for Yuma, Arizona's downtown glow-up. Or do we really need to pay $2.6 million to know that music can help cure social anxiety? We all like walking through a farmer's market, right? It's a good way to enjoy a Saturday morning. But why are we paying $3.4 million for the farmer's market in Hawaii? You know, we also paid for a seatbelt study in Ghana. And we paid for a research project on colonial sounds of Mexico. Spend, 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 spend. It's like there's no debt problem, but we all know that there is. With soaring inflation and record debt, Americans want a plan to restore fiscal sanity, not a plan to spend, 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 spend even more, and tax even more. We don't have the luxury of just sitting around complaining and hoping somebody somewhere fixes the problem. We are that somebody. This is the place and this is the time we need to finally get focused on delivering real solutions for the American people now and in the days ahead. Well, welcome to Volume 7 of Federal Fumbles, where we continue to call out the government for dropping the ball for hardworking Americans, and we work to offer real solutions. It's my way of bringing transparency to how our government is spending money. You can help too. Call your members of Congress. Tell them they need to keep the spending in check and to pass a budget through regular order. We really are all in this together. It's time we all step up and address the problems Democrats, Republicans, the administration, and Congress have ignored for way too long. It's time to pick up the football and run. Federal Fumbles is out now. You can see the way that the government has spent our money and, quite frankly, wasted our money on unnecessary programs by visiting www.lankford.senate.gov. I'm Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. Stick around as we continue to talk about the ways that our national debt is growing and how we can solve that problem. You can follow me on social media at Senator Lankford. Let's actually run with the ball. Let's stop the federal government from fumbling it.